this village, men were forbidden to raise their hands against women. So, one woman raised her hands against everyone until she raised them against the wrong home. This is Storytime with Blossom. Welcome to today's story. Once upon a time, there lived a village called Ala-Nche, a village known far and wide for one rare thing: peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from fear, not the kind that comes from weakness, but peace that was chosen. In Ala-Nche, tradition was law, and the strongest law of all was this: no man must ever raise his hand against a woman. Not in anger, not in discipline, not even in self-defense. From childhood, boys were taught restraint before strength. Elders would say, "Your hands are strong, so your wisdom must be stronger." Men walked away from insults. They reported abuse to elders. They endured shame rather than break tradition. And because of that rule, Ala-Nche became known as a place where homes lasted, marriages survived storms, and quarrels rarely became wounds. But every good law has one weakness: those who abuse it. Her name was Nkiru. Nkiru was loud, bold, sharp-tongued. She knew the law of Ala-Nche very well, and she used it like a weapon. If a man annoyed her, she insulted him publicly. If a husband spoke back, she slapped him. If a neighbor disagreed, she shoved him. And the men, they did nothing. Not because they were weak, but because tradition bound their hands. At first, people laughed it off. "Nkiru is just stubborn," they said. "She will calm down." But Nkiru didn't calm down. She grew bolder. She insulted elders. She beat young men. She embarrassed husbands in front of their wives. Whenever elders warned her, she laughed. "Ha ha ha! What will you do?" she would say. "Call the men to beat me?" Her laughter echoed like poison. Women whispered behind her back. Men avoided her path. Children learned fear instead of respect. And slowly, something dangerous happened. Nkiru began to believe she was untouchable. Among all the men in Ala-Nche, there was one Nkiru enjoyed humiliating the most. His name was Obina. Obina was calm, hardworking, soft-spoken. He never argued, never shouted, never fought back. That made him her favorite target. At the stream, she mocked him. At the market, she slapped him. In the village square, she insulted his manhood. And Obina, he walked away every time. People shook their heads. Why doesn't he report her? Why does he endure this? But Obina held his peace. What Nkiru didn't know was this: Obina had just married, and his wife was not from Ala-Nche. She came from a village where respect was mutual and where boundaries were enforced. Her name was Ifunanya. And Ifunanya had been watching. Ifunanya arrived in Ala-Nche quietly. No drums, no celebration, no loud welcome. She came with her husband Obina, carrying only 2 wooden boxes and a calm confidence that did not beg for attention. From the first day, people noticed something about her. She was respectful but not timid, soft-spoken but not small, gentle but not weak. She greeted elders properly, she spoke to women politely, she smiled at children. But when she looked at men, she looked at them as equals. That alone made some people uncomfortable. Women whispered, "She is different. Her eyes don't drop easily." Ifunanya settled into her home and listened. She listened to the village sounds. She listened to the stories. She listened to her husband. And slowly, she began to understand. One evening, as they ate quietly, she noticed a bruise on Obina's arm. It was faint, old but there. She paused. Obina, she asked gently, "What happened here?" Obina hesitated. That hesitation spoke louder than words. "It's nothing," he said. "Just small misunderstanding." Ifunanya didn't press, but she remembered. Because women who truly love do not ignore patterns. It happened at the market. Nkiru saw Obina and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a haunting smile. She walked towards him with confidence. "So you finally married," she said loudly. "Let's see how long your wife will endure a man like you." People stopped walking. Obina lowered his head. Before he could move away, Nkiru slapped him. The sound was sharp. Ifunanya turned instantly. Silence fell. Everyone waited. This was the moment people always waited for. Would the man react? Would tradition break? Obina stepped back, as always. But this time, someone else stepped forward. Ifunanya. She didn't shout. She didn't rush. She stood between her husband and Nkiru, calm, firm. "Nkiru, don't touch my husband again." The village froze. No woman had ever spoken to Nkiru like that. Nkiru laughed. "Who are you?" she asked mockingly. "This is not your village." Ifunanya nodded. "That's true," she said. "But this is my home now." Nkiru stepped closer. "And what will you do?" she sneered. "Report me to elders like your weak husband?" Ifunanya leaned forward slightly. "This is your first warning. Respect my husband or respect me." The market breathed again. People whispered. Nkiru laughed harder. "You think because you followed a man here you are strong." She waved her hand dismissively. "I will deal with you later." Ifunanya watched her walk away. And for the first time, Nkiru felt something unfamiliar. Resistance.
Nkiru did not like resistance. She fed on fear, on silence, on people backing down. So she decided to crush it. 2 days later, in the village square, she waited. When Obina passed with Ifunanya beside him, Nkiru stood up. "Ah!" she shouted. "So you now walk with bodyguard?" Laughter followed. Nkiru walked closer. "You men of Ala-Nche hide behind tradition," she spat. "And now you hide behind wives too?" Obina tried to move away. Ifunanya held his hand. That alone angered Nkiru. She raised her hand, not toward Obina, but toward Ifunanya. "Remove your hand from him," she snapped. Ifunanya didn't move. That was the mistake. Nkiru pushed her hard. Gasps filled the square. Elders rose halfway from their seats, but before anyone could speak, Ifunanya moved, not in rage, not in madness, in control. She grabbed Nkiru's wrist mid-motion, firm, steady. The laughter died. "This is the second warning," Ifunanya said calmly. Nkiru struggled. "How dare you!" she screamed, and then she slapped Ifunanya. The sound echoed. Silence broke into shock, and that was when Ala-Nche witnessed something it had never seen, a woman defending respect. Ifunanya released her wrist and struck back, once, clean, controlled. Nkiru fell. Dust rose. People screamed. Women covered their mouths. Men stood frozen. Elders shouted. Nkiru tried to stand. Ifunanya stepped forward and spoke loudly so all could hear. "You were protected by tradition," she said. "You abused it. You raised your hands because no one stopped you." She looked around the square. "Respect is not weakness. Protection is not permission." Nkiru sat in the dust, stunned. For the first time in her life, someone had answered her arrogance, and the village knew. Peace had been defended, not broken. The village square did not return to normal after Nkiru fell. No laughter followed. No gossip rose immediately. Instead, there was fear. Fear not of violence, but of truth. The elders stood slowly, one after the other, leaning on their staffs. Their faces were not angry. They were heavy. Because Ala-Nche had a tradition, yes, but tradition had just been tested. Obina stepped forward instinctively. "My elders," he said quickly, voice shaking, "my wife did not come to cause trouble." Nkiru tried to speak. "Silence," one elder said sharply. That word alone shocked everyone. Nkiru had never been silenced publicly before. The oldest elder, Eze Okori, cleared his throat. "For years," he said slowly, "we protected peace by forbidding men from raising hands against women." People nodded. "It was meant to protect dignity," he continued, "not to turn dignity into a weapon." He looked at Nkiru. "You were protected," he said, "but you forgot why." Nkiru opened her mouth. No words came out. Eze Okori turned to Ifunanya. "You," he said, "are not from here." Ifunanya bowed slightly. "But you respected our law," he continued, "even when your husband was humiliated." He paused. "When that law failed to protect justice, you acted." The square breathed in. "This is not a crime," the elder said firmly. "This is a correction." Murmurs spread. Some women nodded slowly. Some men exhaled like they had been holding their breath for years. Then Eze Okori turned back to Nkiru. "You," he said quietly, "will sit." And Nkiru, the woman who once walked like a queen, sat on the bare ground like a child awaiting judgment. That night, Nkiru did not sleep. Her body ached, yes, but her pride hurt more. For the first time, her name was spoken without fear. Women who once avoided her whispered openly. Men who once bowed their heads looked straight ahead. And inside her compound, something she had never met before waited. Loneliness. No laughter, no visitors, no one came to check up on her. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, a voice she had ignored for years. "Power without restraint will turn on you." She laughed then. Now she sat alone. Meanwhile, in Obina's house, silence was different. Peaceful. Obina sat beside his wife and finally spoke. "All my life, I thought endurance was strength." Ifunanya looked at him. "And I thought," she replied, "that silence always meant wisdom." They sat together, not victorious, but healed. That night, the village slept uneasily because something ancient had shifted. The next morning, the gong sounded. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. That meant only one thing: public reckoning. Nkiru was summoned. She arrived late. Her head was high, but her steps were slower. The elders spoke plainly. "You will not be punished with pain," Eze Okori said. "You will be punished with truth." The villagers leaned in. "You will apologize," he continued, "to every man you humiliated." Gasps. "To every woman you used as shield." Silence. "And you will do so publicly." Nkiru trembled. Her mouth opened. This time, words came, but they were thin. "I didn't know," she whispered. The elder shook his head. "You knew," he said. "You just didn't care." One by one, men stood. Quiet men, gentle men, men who had swallowed shame to protect tradition. Nkiru's knees weakened. She kneeled, not because she was forced, but because arrogance had nowhere left to stand. Tears fell, not dramatic ones, real ones. "I forgot that respect is not owned. It is borrowed." The village watched. No cheers, no insults, only understanding. because Ala-Nche had learned something too. Tradition must protect everyone, not empower abuse.
Apology did not heal Ala-Nche immediately. That surprised many people. After Nkiru knelt and spoke her words, some expected relief, some expected laughter to return, some expected everything to reset like a broken calabash glued back together. But peace does not come because words are spoken. Peace comes when wounds stop bleeding, and Ala-Nche was still bleeding. Men returned to their homes that evening quieter than usual. Women watched their husbands differently. Children sensed the tension and played closer to home. Nkiru returned to her compound alone. No escort, no comfort. Her gate creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the house felt smaller than it ever had. The walls that once echoed with her voice now returned it empty. She sat on the floor and stared at her hands. These hands had slapped. These hands had pushed. These hands had pointed. For the first time in her life, she asked herself a question she had never asked before. If power is taken away, who am I? That night, sleep refused her. She remembered every face she had humiliated, the way men lowered their eyes, the way women laughed nervously to stay on her good side. Shame arrived slowly, not like fire, but like cold rain. The men of Ala-Nche gathered quietly the next day, not at the square, not publicly, under the old Udara tree where boys were taught patience and elders taught restraint. No one called the meeting, but they all came. Obina was there, so was Ekenna, so was Chuma, the man Nkiru once slapped in front of his children. They sat in a circle. For a long time, nobody spoke. Then Chuma broke the silence. "I thought endurance made me honorable," he said quietly, "but I think it made me invisible." The men nodded. Another man spoke. "When my wife mocked me because Nkiru did it first, I laughed it off, but inside, something died." A third man clenched his fists. "We protected tradition," he said, "but who protected us?" That question hung in the air like smoke. Obina stood slowly. "My wife is not violent," he said calmly, "but she refused to let injustice hide behind tradition." The men listened. "We must not raise our hands," Obina continued, "but we must also not lower our voices." Something shifted in that circle. Not rebellion, not anger, awareness. For the first time, the men of Ala-Nche began to understand that silence is not always strength. On the third day after the public reckoning, something unexpected happened. Nkiru went out. Not boldly, not loudly. She wrapped herself simply and walked to the stream. Women froze when they saw her. This was the place she once ruled, the place where her laughter silenced others. Now the stream was quiet. Nkiru greeted. No one answered. She fetched water herself. No one helped. She carried the pot on her head, slowly, carefully, and felt its weight burn into her neck. This was new. Halfway home, she stumbled. The pot tipped, water spilled, the clay cracked. For a moment, she stood there, confused, helpless. Then an old woman stepped forward. Not to scold, not to mock, she helped lift the pot. "This is how it feels," she said softly, "to live without fear protecting you." Nkiru's throat tightened. Back in her compound, she sat under the shade and wept, not because she was punished, but because she finally understood. Tradition had shielded her, but humility had never lived in her, and without humility, power had turned her into something she never planned to be. That evening, she went to Obina's house. She did not enter. She knelt at the gate. Ifunanya came out and froze. Nkiru bowed her head fully to the ground. "I did not respect your husband," she said, "and by doing so, I did not respect myself."
Ifunanya watched her carefully. This time there was no audience, no elders, no square, just truth. And for the first time, Nkiru's words did not seek control. They sought forgiveness. Forgiveness did not spread through Ala-Nche like rain. It moved like morning mist, slowly, unevenly, stopping in some places and refusing to enter others. Some people forgave Nkiru quickly. They said, at least she knelt, at least she admitted, at least she changed. But others did not, and they were not wicked people. They were wounded people. Chuma's children still remembered the day their father was slapped in front of them. The boy still avoided the square. The girl still flinched when voices rose. When Nkiru passed their compound, the children went inside. Nkiru noticed. Each time her heart squeezed tighter. For the first time in her life, consequences followed her like a shadow. That evening, the elders met again, not to punish, but to decide something deeper. Ezeokore spoke carefully. Our law protected women, he said, but it did not teach responsibility. Another elder added, we feared men becoming violent, so we ignored women becoming cruel. The elders fell silent, because tradition had never been questioned this way before. Finally, the youngest elder spoke. If we protect one side without teaching restraint, he said, we create another kind of danger. A decision was made, not to abolish the law, but to complete it. The gong sounded again. This time it did not summon fear, it summoned change. The entire village gathered, men, women, elders, youth. Even Nkiru came early and stood quietly at the edge. Ezeokore raised his staff. From today, he declared, no man shall raise his hand against a woman. The people nodded. That law stood firm. But from today also, he continued, no woman shall raise her hand against a man. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. And any person, the elder added, who uses tradition to humiliate, abuse, or dominate another, man or woman, will answer to the council. Silence. Heavy. Right. The elder looked directly at Nkiru. This law was born from your story, he said. Let it end with your growth. Nkiru stepped forward slowly. She knelt again, not because she was ordered, because she understood. I accept, she said softly. Not everyone clapped, but no one objected. That night, Ala-Nche slept differently, not tense, not afraid, aware. Months passed. The village healed slowly. Homes began to laugh again. Men walked straighter, women spoke more gently. And Nkiru? She worked, not as punishment, as humility. She joined women at the stream. She greeted first. She carried loads without complaint. When gossip rose, she walked away. People noticed. Change that is forced is loud. Change that is real is quiet. One afternoon, Chuma called her. She approached slowly. He looked at her for a long time. I forgive you, he said finally. Not because you deserve peace, but because I deserve it. Nkiru wept openly. That night, she sat alone under the stars, and for the first time in her life, she felt light. No power to protect, no fear to control, no crowd to impress, just herself. And that was enough. Peace had returned to Ala-Nche, but peace is not proven when things are calm. It is proven when it is tested. The test came quietly. One afternoon, a trader from another village arrived with his family. They had come to buy land at the edge of Ala-Nche. His wife walked behind him, eyes lowered, body tense. The way she flinched when he raised his voice told a story without words. Women noticed, men noticed, but no one spoke at first. Then, near the stream, the trader shouted at his wife, loud, sharp.
angry. He lifted his hand. The entire village froze. This was not Ala-Nche's way. Before the man's palm could land, voices rose. "Hey! Stop! Not here!" The elders were summoned immediately. The traitor laughed at first. "In my village," he scoffed, "a man disciplines his wife." The words landed badly, very badly. Ifunanya stood slowly, his staff firm. "In Ala-Nche," he said calmly, "no one disciplines with fear." The traitor looked around, confused. Men were not smiling. Women were not laughing. The traitor's wife looked up for the first time. Hope flickered in her eyes. The elders ordered the traitor to leave the village before sunset. No argument, no negotiation. As he was escorted out, the woman hesitated. Then she stepped back. "I will not follow him," she said softly. The crowd inhaled sharply. The elders exchanged looks. She was welcomed. That night, as the woman slept safely in the home of the women's leader, the village understood something important. Their tradition was no longer just a rule. It had become a character. It was Nkiru who visited the stranger the next morning, not as a leader, not as an example, but as someone who had once misused protection. She sat beside the woman quietly. "I once believed power meant control," Nkiru said. "I was wrong." The woman listened silently. "They protected me so much, I forgot that respect must go both ways." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "They beat me," she whispered, "and told me it was love." Nkiru held her hand. "No," she said gently, "love does not leave bruises on the body or the spirit." The elders allowed the woman to stay. She later married again, slowly, carefully, to a man who understood Ala-Nche's values. Years passed, children grew, stories softened, but one thing remained. Whenever people spoke of balance, respect, and dignity, they spoke of Nkiru, not as a warning anymore, but as proof. Proof that a person can fall badly and still rise wisely. Many seasons later, when Ifunanya had joined the ancestors and new elders sat under the old tree, children gathered at the square as they always did in the evenings. One child asked, "Why do men here never beat women?" Another asked, "And why do women here never insult men?" An old woman smiled. "Because once," she said, "we forgot that respect must face both directions." She told them the story of the village that protected women, of the woman who abused that protection, of the woman who came from another land and reminded everyone what courage looked like, of how tradition matured instead of breaking. And the children listened wide-eyed, because stories like this do not belong to one generation. They belong to all generations. Nkiru lived a long life, quiet, honored. When she died, the village mourned, not loudly, but deeply. They said, "She taught us what power without humility can do, and what humility can heal." And Ala-Nche remained a village where men were strong without being violent, women were protected without being arrogant, respect walked freely between both. Thank you for sitting with Storytime with Blossom, where African stories carry truth, where village drama teaches life, and where every lesson stays longer than entertainment. If this story touched you, share it. If it taught you, comment. And if you believe stories can change hearts, subscribe, because some traditions are not meant to be broken, they are meant to be understood. Until next time, guard your power, respect your protection, and remember, true strength is balance.